You know, death comes pretty easily to Marc Spector, and he's faced it more times than probably any hero. But Marvel has announced a new series that might see the end of Marc Spector as the Knight of Khonshu. Let's take a couple minutes to dive in. Well, as many of you know, if you're a long-term comic fan, characters die quite often in their comic series, even those characters that have a close association with death and rebirth. And this time, it looks like that might be Marc Spector. Now, Marvel's been on a bit of a tear lately because they just killed off Miss Marvel, although she's already been brought back in her own comic as a mutant and might have set a new land speed record for character resurrection. So anyway, it appears Marvel Studios is planning on killing off Marc Spector in the next couple of months. Recently, the publisher shared a teaser for a new comic storyline entitled The Last Days of Moon Knight. And earlier this week, they've confirmed that Marc Spector will indeed meet his maker in a new 3-part story, Alexandra Cappuccio, starting this October with issue number 28. Now, I've been catching up on this new series since we did that video about Marc Spector becoming the Midnight Man. I've linked that down below. And it's been a ton of fun, leading us in pretty wild directions. And honestly, this has been foreshadowed already in the books a couple of times. Now, writer Jed MacKay had a couple things to say about the upcoming series, and I think we can take a couple of details from this that gives us an idea of what's about to go down. Almost all the pieces are now on board. On one side, Moon Knight and his allies in the Midnight Mission, and on the other, the Black Spectre, his creatures, and his plan for New York. We've been building towards this confrontation since number 19, and starting Moon Knight number 28, Moon Knight and the Black Spectre go to war. It's not just a question of victory, but survival itself. The Midnight Mission is already cloaked in the black of mourning. Now, MacKay had a lot to say here about the story, but didn't reveal a lot directly. But in issue 19, where he says the story kicks off, Hunter Moon and Moon Knight, we'll talk a little bit about Hunter in a second, have a very specific conversation about the limits to resurrection and how you only get to come back to life so many times. I think Marc Spector might have used up all his lives. Now, over the last couple of issues, Marc Spector has not been alone, and I think whoever is going to inherit the mantle has already been in the books for quite a while. In the very first issue of this new Moon Knight run, we were introduced to Hunter Moon. Now, we don't even know the character's full real name yet, but we do know he is a doctor born in Luxor, Egypt, and a worshipper of Khonshu, who, interestingly enough, already fancies himself as the second high priest, just the opposite of Marc Spector. Now, Khonshu granted him the gift of Chorus, whereas mine was invested by Khonshu with the memories of all the previous Moon Knights. This gave him the skills and powers of every person who has ever served the god of the moon. Additionally, setting him aside from Marc Spector, he has the ability to perform some healing rituals that can help patients recover from pretty serious injuries, and creating a pretty unique version of the character. Even though his costume is Moon Knight inspired, he has his own way of doing things. His outlook is completely different, and I have liked him in the last couple of issues. Now, it doesn't mean him and Marc are totally the same. In the current issues, Marc has been protecting some vampires, and Hunter is much more of a zealot to Khonshu than Marc has ever been, and thinks those vampires are a total distraction. As a matter of fact, he seeks to destroy him for a while, so you can definitely see we could be getting a new version of Moon Knight that's much darker, very akin to the time that we had Azrael as the Batman in Gotham City, who is a much brutaler version of the Dark Knight. Now, if you read comics, nobody stays dead, and I don't suspect Marc Spector is leaving the pages of Marvel forever. It's pretty clear we're going to have a new Moon Knight in Marvel Comics, and it's more than likely going to be Hunter's Moon. Exactly how different this version of Moon Knight ends up being, well, we're going to have to wait and see.